Welcome back to the SP show. Today's guest is Professor Chennupati Jagadish. Professor Jagadish is a leading researcher in semiconductor optoelectronics and nanotechnology and a distinguished professor emeritus at the Australian National University. He is also president of Australian Academy of Science and fellow of a Royal Society. I wanted this conversation because batteries and electrification are ultimately the material science problems and supply chains issues at scale. In this episode, we will cover his journey into the science leadership, what shaped his research career, what it takes to translate academic breakthroughs into real products, how AI can speed up the discovery and time to market in the clean energy sectors. Hi, Professor Chennupati. Welcome to the SP show. Very good to have you here.
Oh, thanks, Sri, for having me.
So, what actually nanotechnology does for ordinary people today, either in our phones or solar panels, or even I think your neuroscience related research with our brains as well. Can you please shed some light on that?
So, nanotechnology, Sri, is like, I tell people, like, playing Lego. But instead of using Lego blocks, you're using atoms and molecules to be able to make whatever the structure you would like to make. As you know, that using Lego, we can make all sorts of shapes or so. In the same way, by if you're able to engineer the materials at the atomic and molecular scale, that allows us to be able to make a different kinds of nanoscale shapes and structures. So also the materials, the properties when they're in the bulk form, their properties are quite different than when you go to the nanoscale. And first and foremost, this number of atoms on the surface become quite significant with the number of atoms which is in the volume. That means surface atoms really influence the properties of that nanostructure, whatever it is, whether you talk about a nanocrystal or a nanowire or a nanotube, and or otherwise anything is also quantum physics starts coming into picture. So the combination of the surface effects and the quantum physics, because classical physics doesn't work, so there's a combination of those things can enable us to be able to do innovative devices, whether you talk about sensors or transistors, and so are the lasers or LEDs, and a range of things, I mean solar cells or so. Then you're exploiting these new properties being created at the nanoscale for improved properties in terms of faster, smaller, and less energy consumption. And so then also that being small, that means you can be able to pack many devices or so. For example, now we're already making means transistors which are as small as 2 nanometers or so, and lots of chips are already have got 5 or 6 nanometer feature sizes in transistors or so. That means smaller the device, and you can pack more transistors. That means more functionality. Smaller the device, you can switch them on and off faster. That means also you can be able to make faster devices. And again, lasers also, which we are developing, we are used for internet for optical fiber communications. And again, far smaller the devices, they consume less energy. And again, energy consumption is an important issue in terms of the greenhouse gas emissions and the net zero energy transition. And also faster means nowadays the demand for the data is so high. That means we need to really develop the new class of devices, and that's what we're working on. And again, we're using some breath sensors to be able to detect diabetes and ketosis or so without having to do the pin pricking for do the glucose testing or so, for example. And then also that we're using some of the nano wires and for understanding dementia and be able to help people with the dementia in the longer term as well.
So if you give the like a synopsis of your almost 3 decade long research career, so can you paint us the 2 or 3 breakthroughs you are involved with, which we are very proud of?
So one of the technologies which we developed are the high power lasers, high power semiconductor lasers, which are used in optical fiber communications now. See, when you're sending signals through the optical fibers, because then what happens is that after some certain distance, so the signal is becoming weaker. So then, how do we be able to amplify that signal? What we do is that we give another laser, which gives the extra energy boost to that one so that you can send the information further or so. Essentially, you're doing the amplification of the optical signals without having to convert them to electrical signals and then amplify them in the electronics and reconverting them back, which is not very efficient or so. So we developed those lasers, and particularly very high power lasers where we had the world record output power, and then now they are commercially used or so. That means, of course, mind you that whenever we talk about internet and optical fiber communications, multiple technologies come together as well. And then if each of us is contributing a small way, which really helps to be able to the entire systems to work as well, sort of thing. So that's one thing which I can say that we are really proud of. The
Uh-huh.
other thing is that we developed some infrared detectors which are used for means defense applications or night vision applications, or otherwise also biomedical imaging application of detection of cancer, or clots and night vision and a range of things. Again, these infrared detector technologies have been widely used in industry as well. So it means those are the two things at the old time, but the most recent time we're making flexible solar cells, and again, flexible solar cells can be attached to the future on your backpacks, or to be able to charge your electronic devices, or also on the top of the cars, and a range of things we can do. Again, the sensors which I mentioned to you, in fact, we are in the process of commercializing the technology, which is led by my colleague, Professor Lan Fu. And then we are using these breath sensors to be able to detect ketosis. Ketosis is a pathological condition for people, those who got high levels of diabetes or so. And if you can really monitor that one by just from their breath, but rather than having to do the pin pricking or so, particularly even that could be very useful for children with diabetes or so, because in fact, I happened to give a talk at a conference. One of the American colleagues in the audience was asking lots of questions, and afterwards he came and told me that his son has got a diabetes, and some technology like this will be transformational from his life, from his point of view. And it so turned out, when we are talking to various people, those in commercialization, and the pets have got the same problems. In fact, animal healthcare groups are also want to take our technology to be able to help pets be able to measure the breadth of the pet and then be able to see. It becomes very cumbersome to be able to do the glucose testing by pin pricking or so to the pets or so. Again, these are technology which we're really further moving forward as well with that. And again, we're making some nano lasers. Again, those nano lasers will be useful for optical fiber communications in the long term as well. Again, we're moving towards quantum communications of making the single photon sources, and where you can send information one photon at a time. That means people cannot really tap that one, and that means if they try to tap that one, then it will be destroy itself. So that means that can be very secure communications and other things we're developing as well. So you can see that I'm excited about a range of things which we are working on, and then again they got a range of applications as well.
As you are in the very application oriented research, just I want to understand what kind of research you are doing which can be justified for the publicly funded university slash research fund programs which you are running.
Yeah, thank you, Sri. It's very important to really make sure that the first and foremost, we need to do the fundamental research. Fundamental research is the foundation for applied research and the technology development. We only focus on applied research and technology development. There's no foundation. In the process, you'll not be able to generate the next generation technologies which are needed. Because of the fact that the fundamental research has got a long time frames, that is why the public investment in fundamental research is absolutely critical. Technology development, commercial companies may be interested in taking that one to further next stages or so, because their time horizons are shorter. That means they are much more interested in taking something and applying this one for one technology, one application or the other or so. So that's why the full spectrum need to be covered in terms of fundamental research, applied research, technology development, and translation. And then if you only cherry pick one or the other, then we're missing out as a global community. So that is why it is very important we really keep that one in mind. My research always starts off with the fundamental research of how to make these nanostructures, how to engineer them, and how to control their size, their shape, and all these things. And then studying their electronic and optical properties. And then once you understand those ones, then where can I use them for a range of applications or so. And then once you really develop some applications, of course, some applications can find immediate commercial opportunities. Some may not, because some may take some time. And so that's why, again, I mean, you need to be patient and then pursue ones which your market needs as well. And having started a laser company called Acton Lasers in 99 with commercializing our high power laser technology, and after spending about 18 months, half the time in Canberra, in half the time in Silicon Valley, talking to various investors and strategic partners or so, and then we were about to get $20 million, the investment, and then 2001, the tech crash took place, and then ultimately our investors have pulled out and we had to close the company. Then I realized you may have a great technology. If the market really changes very quickly, which is not in your hands, it can change everything and your technology may never see the light of the day. But of course, I've learned a lot during that process. But during this process of commercialization, I've also learned, and at my heart, I'm an academic. I like to be an academic and then be able to inspire the next generation, train the next generation, and then let the next generation make the difference to the world. And so thereby my impact is much bigger than I doing it on my own or so, because of the fact that the market can change very quickly, which I've learned firsthand experiences. But now, of course, I advise companies, and then I interact with my students are starting multiple companies, and they work in various companies or so. I encourage students to not only just pursue academic research, but also explore various options of whether you want to go into national labs and do the government research, or otherwise policy advice to the government. Otherwise, go and start companies or go and work in companies.
So if you look at the clean tech stack, I would say either it can be batteries or semiconductors, solar, hydrogen, whatnot. In your opinion, where do you think the deep tech research is going to most likely to get the next big leap?
So of course, at the moment, the net zero energy transition is a challenging time. And so then, of course, we are exploring a range of technologies. I am of the view, Sri, that we should not really assume that these energy transitions can be relying on one particular technology. A combination of technologies play an important role. So that's why the one need to be open-minded and then say that which technology is beneficial where and when, and you make use of them appropriately or so. So that's very, very important. That's something which is sometimes people get carried away by saying that my technology is only technology which will really help in terms of reaching net zero. But because it's a big global problem, you know that means that we need to really be open minded and then make use of the combination of technologies depending on the circumstances which you are really looking at. That's one thing. And we really spend a lot of time. It's not energy generation; it's energy conversion. So one type to the chemical to electrical, or electrical to chemical, or whatever it is, or sun to electrical or so. So basically, we focus a lot on energy conversion, and also that we focus on energy storage, which is, of course, initially we focus much more on the solar cells or so wind or one of these things. But the recent years, we're realizing that the storage is equally important. Without storage, means when the wind is not there or solar is not there, what you're going to do with, you need the energy. So then also one area which we really neglect is utilization side of things. If you got a great energy technology and you got excellent storage technology, but you're using the devices which are not very efficient, you're wasting a lot of your energy. So that means we need to really look at the utilization side as well. So when I talk about optoelectronic devices or transistors and now low energy consumption and all these things, faster devices or so, that means that's where when I talk about utilization side also we need to focus on in order to be able to really cover all three aspects of it. In terms of solar cells, for example, of course, silicon has been the workhorse for this solar industry. And we've explored decent size solar cells. They've not really taken off, and only they were stuck about 11 or 12% for a long time. Some people like Professor Michael Gretzel has really pioneered this particular area, and then they've been used for some places, but not really taken off the way they were expecting as well. Again, multiple groups have been working on organic solar cells. And again, Professor Richard Friend or Professor Stephen Forrest and various groups. And again, they've also not taken off the efficiencies which we were hoping for. But most recently, the perovskite solar cells have come. And then again, nobody was predicting the perovskite solar cells will be, expected. That's why the new discoveries in the new materials can really open up the doors. Perovskites is a great example where, for example, about 20 years back, we would have said perovskites will be one of the key contenders for the future solar energy. Nobody would have even imagined that will happen. So, but also you develop the new materials again, particularly materials like perovskite materials. They are the low process cost and then also low barrier materials. See, for example, if I'm using, MOCVD reactors, metal organic chemical vapor deposition or molecular beam epitaxy reactors, for example, they're expensive technologies. That means, there's a high barrier technologies. So not everybody can be able to go and develop these things, but whereas perovskites is anybody with a beaker and then with a spinner and a fume hood, they're able to make these things, for example. So that means that's why thousands of people are now working on it. And then now, we've already exceeded for 25% of the efficiency within the last decade or so. And every year, and the challenge there is that stability issues. So that's what we're looking at, and then seeing that how do we make them stable in terms of gets impacted by the humidity. Of course, you can also probably be able to have barrier layers also to be able to avoid that humidity really reaching these. By the way, when you say 25%, they're all done in the fume hoods with nitrogen ambient or so, but not in the air or so. But again, most of the efficient solar cells are also made out of lead-containing compounds, which is again some environmental impacts of those ones. People are exploring various tin and other alternative-based materials as well as part of that one. So again, that I think there are already commercial companies. Some companies have already been started in various parts of the world. And Oxford PV is one of them. We're trying to commercialize some of the technologies. Is developed by Henry Snaith and colleagues there at Oxford University or so something as well. So I'm thinking that that's an area where which it's worthwhile to watch out and then see how that will take off, and then can people be able to solve some of these fundamental issues and also scalability issues and other things as well. As you know that any technology, if you want to make it to work, and then first and foremost, showing in the lab is one thing, and then taking to the next step is entirely different thing. Packaging of the devices, manufacturability, repeatability, and also the cost effectiveness as well. See, when we talk about hydrogen, for example, we've been able to show that solar to hydrogen efficiency of 20% or so. But when we did the techno-economic analysis, we found that each kilo of hydrogen is going to be $8, which market cannot accommodate that one. One need to be below $2 or so sort of thing. So that's where the challenges sometimes in these technology areas is. You may have a great technology, but it's not cost effective. That means market may not be able to accept that one as well. So that's where the challenges come. That is why, as scientists and engineers, and we need to really think from that perspective. Not only coming up the new ideas, how do we able to are they scalable, are they manufacturable, and are they stable, and also in the real world conditions, and also they're economically viable also. That's where silicon really continues to be workhorse for the solar industry because of the fact that it meets all those requirements also. Anyway, I think the still the I mean, it's an open question, and then we just have to see. But we need to explore new materials as well, particularly when you're developing with the AI and all these technologies. So those are the challenges which we have in terms of energy generation side. Again, the storage side, we talk about batteries. Suppose batteries have been used, but then batteries, for example, if you want to really have some batteries on an aeroplane, for example, it's not going to happen because of the weight and other things as well. So there's a lot of challenges there. And so then that's where, of course, you can probably use it for drones and other things, but not for really, passenger machines, not at this stage at least. That means, again, some challenges are there. How do we really convert the CO2, which is capturing of CO2 from the atmosphere, and then converting them into high density hydrocarbons, which are used. That means you can create a cyclic system as well, this sort of thing as well. That's something which is worthwhile to look at. And hydrogen, which we already talked about, even people are talking about ammonia. People think that ammonia may be even better than hydrogen. Also, people are exploring these things as well. So really, it's an open question, and then it's a global challenge. And by working together, hopefully, be able to create new energy, conversion technologies, new storage technologies, as well as also the utilization technologies, which are more efficient as well.
I really like that concept of conversion, storage, utilization concept, right? Because I work with both conversion and storage, but I never thought about the utilization aspects of it. I think it's quite different angle, your perspective on that. So in the similar lines, Professor, that we almost see every day, right? A breakthrough material is discovered, and then our press is all over it. But what are the biggest reasons these solutions are not actually converting from the lab to the market? They're dying in between. And what are the usual bottlenecks to become these all discoveries into real products?
So one of the bottlenecks, I'll just give you one of the examples. My own laboratory in the lasers, for example, I was mentioning to you, we're trying to commercialize laser technology.
Yeah.
So you see, you make a laser in the lab, and then you put under a probe station, and then you measure the properties of those ones, and they look really beautiful. You write a nice paper out of that one. Right? But then if I want to make it as a product, I need to package it. I need to remove the heat generated in the laser. I need to be able to make sure that it's mechanically stable and electrically stable. And also I can be able to couple the light to an optical fiber or so. There's a lot of packaging technology involved. In fact, only you solve the 10% of the problem of developing the laser technology. It's demonstrating the laser, but 90% of the work is ahead of you in terms of being able to make it into a product. But for example, in the universities, we do not have the expertise in terms of packaging and other things because packaging technologies are mostly done in the industry. But these people, those who got expertise in packaging and other things, are really treated like gold dust by industry, and it's very difficult to get them sort of thing. So that means, then I've realized firsthand and the amount of engineering you need to do from the concept which you've demonstrated in the lab to be able to make as a product. And that is not, means exciting research, but you need to do it if you want to make it as a product, for example. I've learned in the hard way, for example, something. And so that's where I think, why in some parts of the world these are successful. For example, why technologies are successful in Silicon Valley, but not in other parts of the world. Because in southern places, in the Silicon Valley, there are multiple companies are available. You do your core business, somebody can do the facet coating and somebody can do the thermal heat sinking and somebody else can do some, optical, fiber pigtailing and all these things. That means you'll be able to fast track this product very quickly. Productization becomes much faster. Then when you're doing it on your own, you're learning from your experience and how things it takes much longer by the time market may move on. So, okay. So that's one thing which really, I will give you one example. Most recent work in terms of our hydrogen work, for example, by the way, we transferred some of our hydrogen technology to one of the local companies here, the fastest growing the future industries or so. The thing is that there again, when you really was doing this so-called photoelectrochemical cell, and then we were able to demonstrate excellent photoelectrodes or so, photoanodes and photocathodes, but you're really operating them at 10 milliamps per cm square, and you write a paper out of that one, and I think everybody's excited about it. It's wonderful. When we were talking to industry, they were asking us, can your electrodes can operate at 1 amp per cm square? We're
Wow.
talking about 100 times more. Okay.
Yeah.
When you start using these ones, they're not stable in those high currents. That's what industry wants. That means there's a sort of, you may be excited about new things, but then what is industry requirements are quite different. And that's where we spent a lot of time, which was led by my colleague, Professor Shiva Karaturi, and who has really spent a lot of time and to be able to optimize these things and make sure that we're able to demonstrate to them. We have to develop the processes need to be changed and materials need to be changed to be able to demonstrate at those current densities, for example. So just to give you two examples or so, there's a big gap between what we do in the laboratory to what is required in the marketplace, and the packaging technologies, manufacturability issues as well, scalability. Is it going to see in the lab? We really do these things at a small scale, a few centimeters by few centimeters. It looks pretty good, but is it scalable at that scale? Are they still efficient? And what is the variability from device to device? And so then, so all these things come into picture, and then if you really cannot really make all of them to work, that is why lots of times exciting research which happens and you get a nice press release or so, but you don't see them in the products because, as I said, look, 90% of the work still need to be done. But of course, university researchers, you cannot expect them to really take to the next steps because their job is to train the students and then postdoctoral fellows and explore new ideas. And that is where some of the government programs and other things come into picture, and where they can really fill that so-called gap before you go to the marketplace or so. Sometimes in lots of countries, including in Australia, we go to the marketplace too soon. Venture capitalists, don't care about your technology. They're only after quickly making money. So that means, when if you go too early to the marketplace, that means, but it takes long time to develop these manufacturability issues. And then they lose interest, and in the process, they just leave you. In the process, you become history. So that is why some of the government programs really becomes an important one to ensure that, whatever is happening in the university sector, and then be able to be taken to the next steps of exploring the manufacturability issues and scalability issues or so. Then once if you really productize those ones and then you're ready to go to marketplace, then it becomes much more easier to be able to take it to the next step and be able to commercialize technologies also. So there are multiple steps in the system, and that's why I say that when I talk about research investments, we need to have the full pipeline, not at one end or the other or the middle, and we need to have the full pipeline.
Well, it's fantastic, actually. I mean, I really appreciate your analysis of entire ecosystem there, because I always, as a researcher myself, I'm always so excited about discoveries and high impact papers and so on. But at the end of the day, you have to find some value for this kind of research you're doing, right? As we know, particularly the clean energy sector is having a special problem. Okay, the one is it is mostly hardware driven, highly regulated, and also usually long cycle lives. Research translated into product, right? So the research incentives currently we have in place globally, it's not only in Australia, are fit for reality, or we are funding on the wrong outcomes, for example.
So the problem is again is that the governments need to look at in the more into the long term thinking as well. looking at the full spectrum. But again, I always tell people, Sri, that the on-off funding is not very good. Develop a program, you run that one for 3 years, and you stop that one, you start a next program. There's a gap between the two. In the process, those who really develop these things have to go and find some other job or some other project or something. And you lost the continuity of it, and the skills they developed is lost and other things. And I always joke about it also that I'm a world leader as long as my student or a postdoc is with me. And when they leave, when my world leadership comes down to normal state, and then again, it takes a while before the new student comes and be able to do these things sort of thing as well. So that's why the continuity of research is a very important one. That's why continuity of funding is an important one. So that is why long-term, the development of these things is very important. For example, in the US, why in the US these things work much better. Of course, in general, people are much more entrepreneurial. The second thing is also people are willing to take the risk. But even if you fail, people are willing to invest in you because they know that you know what not to do, and then people do these things. But in many countries, whether it is European countries or most in Asian countries or so, that we are afraid of failure. That means in the process, means if somebody fails, then nobody wants to touch them with a barge pole, which really doesn't help, sort of thing as well. So you should not really discourage failure. If you're not failing, that means you're not really found pushing the boundaries of the technology which you're really trying to develop as well. But also that is, for example, in the US, in addition to the research funding from the National Science Foundation or National Institute of Health or so, but also they got something called SBIR program, Small Business Innovation Research Program, and where every funding agency in US has to spend 3% of their research to support small businesses. If a university professor, I started, for example, developed a new sensor, and then I can take leave from the university for 2 years, and then I can apply for this SBR program along with my students. And then you go out and then start a company and then try to develop this technology. And then using some of these government programs allow them to be able to take the productize the whatever the thing which you developed in the lab, and then they go to the marketplace much later. And in many countries, people go to the marketplace in many parts of the world too soon, and but market it doesn't have the patience in the process. Means investors come and then support you for 3 years or so, and then they move on to the next one. So then that's where lots of failures come into picture as well. So that's why also again, means we need to also be prepared for it. Even venture business also, everybody knows that less than 10% of the companies they invest are successful, and the remaining 90% you lose. But those, out of those ones, one or two companies, those are really the unicorns, and they can make all the money which they lost as well. So that's why again that investment community also need to look at from that perspective. But in lots of times in European venture capitalists and also Asian venture capitalists also, then they really don't have that, if you want to call it as the patience, and then also say that look, yes, some of them we're going to fail, but we are very happy to give it a go as long as technology looks good and the team is good as well. Sometimes technology is good, but team is not good, is not going to help as well. That's why lots of times investors look at it. Are they dependable people or not? This technology is good, but if they're not dependable people, otherwise they don't have the passion. And so then they may feel that it's not worthwhile to invest in them as well. So that's where some of the challenges we have in order to be able to do these things. So that's why we need to create an ecosystem of fundamental and applied research by the governments, and then also mechanisms where you can take that fundamental and applied research to the technology development, manufacturability, and scalability process. And then also the venture community, those are willing to take the risks and be able to take to the next step as well. So that you need to have the full ecosystem, and that's why in the US, the full ecosystem is there, and because of the fact that they've got lots of success stories, and they know how the system works and other things. That's why I think Europe need to learn, and then Asian countries also need to learn towards this one, and that will help in order to be able to create the right ecosystem.
I would like to stay towards slightly onto the current hype around the artificial intelligence. Okay, so as we both know that in clean energy transition or clean energy research, the killer is the time. You know, time to validate the product, time to create the product, do the iterations of the product, and also qualify for the applications orientations. So where do you see that AI realistically compress these timelines? Is it more on the discovery phase, the design phase, the testing phase, or manufacturing phase? Where do you think AI will have impact, most impact, I would say?
I would think that the discovery phase that can have an impact, and in terms of being able to come up with new materials, and in fact, last week, Professor Kostya Konstantinov, and a Nobel laureate for developing graphene along with Andre Game. And he gave a talk at a conference in Sydney. He said that people have been using AI to be able to design millions of hundreds of thousands of materials, and out of them only 50 were the able to be the manufacturable or is possible to be made in the laboratory. But then out of them, none of them worked. So that means that there's a lot of challenges in terms of being able to. AI will have an important role to play, but also we need to see how ultimately all these new materials which we're designing which ones are going to be actually possible to be made in the laboratory, and then ultimately which ones are going to really work in the real world as well. So that means that's where I think if we can really find ways to be able to design materials which are manufacturable by
Mhm.
using AI, and that's where we have not reached there yet, then that can be very useful in terms of discovery phase to identify new materials. Instead of making material and studying their properties, try to do the inverse design. I want these properties. Can you design a material for me which is manufacturable? At the moment, probably the AI tools can really help you to say that yes, you can use this, you can make, this material can have this property and all these things, but if it is not a manufacturable material, so then it really doesn't lead to anything worthwhile. Obviously, you're not going to try. Thousands of materials keep on manufacturing them. That means a lot of resources get wasted as well. So that is where I think AI models need to be improved, and also that AI also physics-based models need to be done as well, not just as extrapolating from between the two. And so then saying that, look, this could be very interesting, but is there a physics behind that particular those models or not is very important as well. That AI models are very much dependent on data, but at the same time, is there a physics behind these models which they have been developing the AI? Where are they realistic or not? And then are they leading to manufacturable materials or not? And that's becomes very important. That means instead of trying to make thousands of materials, that at least the theoretical guidance or the AI is guiding us to try these ones, and let me try these 50 rather than thousands of them. That means we hopefully will be able to make use of our resources more effective. I agree with you that there's a lot of hype is taking place and everybody jumping on it. And we talk about AI hallucinations, and essentially, AI can go and then extrapolate things and then say that this will be this. But that's why I think you need to really be able to verify and make sure does it make sense or not. So that's where the issue comes. That is where the human intuition comes into picture. And AI may throw at you lots of things. Does it make sense or not? And otherwise, is it manufactured or not? What are the challenges which we face? And so those are things which we need to look at as well as a material science community to be able to identify new materials.
So the way we are transforming the AI revolution, okay, fast forward into next 5 to 10 years. So what would be the new workflow we expect in the clean energy tech, particularly because of AI, which is not practical before?
So the thing is that you see at the moment also, in addition to the simulations and other things which we are doing now, and then again, the input which you give in becomes an important one, Sri, that again, if the input is not very good, and as I say that garbage in, garbage out, and then also the models also become an important one. The combination of those two plays an important role, but also that people have been also moving towards, particularly chemists and others, the robotic way of doing the experiments as well. Essentially, means robot-based experiments where you don't have to be there all the time. You can ask it to do multiple, the experiments and then identify and then measure the properties and all these things. So it means that there's a sort of technology is also developing there as well. The combination of these things can really help us to be able to really, if you want to call it as the hone in on the materials which are really going to ultimately be helpful in the longer term. You know. So that's a lot of work need to be done still. And certainly there's one thing also that, we can make a material and that study some properties and then get excited about it and taking to the next step of making actual device. There's also a lot of significant effort also need to be put there as well. And you may be looking as individual material may look good, but if you put all things together, then is it going to work well? For example, a material shows that it's got a good absorption. What about carrier mobilities? Again, how are you able to extract those carriers efficiently or not? For example, if you're talking about a solar cell, all these things need to be taken into consideration when we're dealing with these things as well. So there's lots of people really, really write make a material and take a photoluminescence spectrum or X-ray data and then write a paper and then let's see electron microscope. But then all those materials don't make it to devices. But by the time we come to the device level, There are lots of other complexities. Interfaces play an important role. Surfaces play an important role. And then, compatibility of the materials play an important role. And many things need to come together in order to be able to working devices. I was just joking with Professor Constantino after his talk. So at least material scientists don't have to go and look for jobs because of AI, because there's a big gap between what AI tells you and what is possible. That means we still have jobs to do, and then there's lots of in the human intuition and human ingenuity is becomes a very important one as well.
So, based on your experience, Professor, and also your leadership at the Academy of Science, so what one has to do, or one institute has to do, to translate this fundamental research into a reasonable a product which is useful for the general public. Let us say you're talking about the solar cells is the best example. So we're transition from the almost silicon to now you're talking about perovskites and almost reaching the like 20 to 25% of the efficiency, which is phenomenal as compared to which we are wasting so much of energy day to day. So what kind of systems should be in place to translate this fundamental research into applications?
So the thing is that the at the moment most of the research is taking place in the university sector, where we are really demonstrating some innovative devices as a community and then publishing papers or so. But then the challenge is that what about the next steps? So then how do you really make sure that whatever we are doing in the laboratory is a scalable process, manufacturable process? Are the systems in place where people are able to take even out of say for example, there are about 100 materials people are exploring. Which one is really practical in terms of able to make that to work? And then who is going to take the next steps and then see that is it a product? Can I make this thing what I'm making in the lab can be productized? Is it manufacturable? Is it stable? And is it scalable? Is it economically viable? And all those things need to be done. So that's why the governments have an important role to play in terms of investments to be able to take to the next steps as well. There are
So
some
what kind of
institutions.
systems or institutions they should build in between the
So
academia and industry? Is there any
yeah,
kind of
that's why
propositions?
I think sometimes national labs can play an important role. And in Australia, we got something called a cooperative research centers, which brings both the industry and then the academia as well. So thereby, means the academics are also talking to industry and then identifying what are their needs, and then they take what they're doing in the lab and then see that can I really be able to meet the needs of the industry, and then be able to take to the next steps or so. And once you're able to take to the next steps and then say that okay, now I'm ready for to pass it on to the industry, and then industry to take to the next level or so. There's a big gap between the university research and then the industry, and we need to fill that gap, and that's where sometimes systems are not there to be able to deal with these matters as well. So that's why we need to make sure, that's why they're creating the right ecosystem and then the rights places do certain aspects of it. You cannot expect the university researchers to really do things which are needed, manufacturability issues and other things, because that's not, it's not compatible to the university structures or so. But also you got students and other things, student leaves, then that means you don't have the capacity to be able to continue that particular research. Otherwise, your project has come to an end, and that becomes also that you want to explore new ideas and other things. Universities should continue to be the people, those are doing the fundamental research and training the next generation of researchers. And then you got systems in place. Either the students, those are finishing their PhD, are able to go to the next step if they're particularly passionate about it, and then be able to see can either by startup companies or through these mechanisms of the government mechanisms to be able to the next step, and then be able to really hand over to the industry or so. But again, I think that's why the full spectrum need to be supported. And otherwise, most of the times, there's a big disconnect between what industry wants and the university are able to do. Because, for example, in my own nanofabrication laboratories, because see, our facilities are multi-user facilities. But the multi-user facilities means, same machine used for multiple materials. That means if you use one material, then the conditions of the chamber changes, and whatever you've done a month back may not be very good because of the fact that people have used it for multiple processes. But whereas industry has got a dedicated process for different material systems or different particular devices, that's why they got the reproducibility and other things. And it's impossible to be able to do those things in the university sector. So that is why we got other mechanisms need to be able to cover those things. We got something called Australian National Fabrication Facility, which is a national research infrastructure facility. And again, we got about 8 nodes, and then different people use different nodes, really focus on different areas, nanophotonics or nanoelectronics or quantum computing or nanomaterials or bio nanomaterials and a range of things. So thereby they are only focusing on one particular area of expertise, and within that itself, but also that multiple people are using for multiple purposes as well. So then the next stage need to be there. Sometime can I take this one, what's been developed in these labs, to the next stage of pilot production side of things, and what are the challenges there or so. And again, that's missing again here, but of course, many countries that's a challenge as well. But again, by the way, that same researchers may not be good for doing all aspects of it, because university researchers is passionate about trying the next thing or so. That means that they just want to try explore new ideas and new materials or training the new student or so. But whereas I mean, that people those these take manufacturing different kinds of mindset they have, and then they've got a different skill set they need to have as well. So that is why we don't want to force fit university researchers which are more creative in terms of it coming with ideas and training students and postdocs or so, to make them to do all of the things. Some of the academics may be interested in doing those things, but it's fine. We should encourage and we should not create any barriers, but you don't want to force them to do those things. That's where the misfit can happen. There's a lot of frustration. You may invest a lot of money, but that may not lead to great outcomes. So that's why you need to find the right people and the right mechanisms to do certain various aspects of these ones to be able to take it to the next levels, the final stage of commercialization and product manufacturing.
So for the students who are just entering into the clean tech sectors, particularly energy materials sector, what sort of best combination of the skills they should possess now to in order to compete or ready for the AI transformations?
Certainly, I think AI is becoming like a tool. In fact, in the old days, when the computers have come, and at that time, it's and everybody thought the computers take away all of our jobs or so sort of thing, but that has not happened. In fact, it created more new jobs. But then again, people need to be aware of the AI developments and then learn about the techniques which can be used for AI, and how they can always think about how can I use AI as a tool, not only for improving their English or writing skills and those things, but also as a research tool, and then be able to do that when those skills becomes more and more important. But again, as you know, that even AI, what type of questions you need to ask really will lead to the outcome which you get from AI as well. But even if you don't know how to ask the right question, maybe you may not be able to get the outcome which you're hoping for as well. So that's why AI tools becomes learning AI tools becomes very important. But also philosophically, see that I'm of the view that if you have the fundamental sciences, if you really become a master, then what happens is that you can really branch into any application sort of thing. You know. So people ask me, how can you really work in different areas? Means I've got a strong background in physics and mathematics, and also, means the electronics. So that allowed me to be able to venture into various areas or so. So that's why I always tell people, means don't specialize too early in the game. If you become too specialized, what happens is tomorrow the technology which is needed is quite different. Then you're in your mind, you really confine yourself to you are a specialist in that particular area, which may not be helped. That's why try to keep your early education as broad as possible. So that means you're able to really be able to contribute to any technology which is coming in the future as well.
So you mentioned that you have a lot of students and postdoc and PhD fellows, and you mentor them to become the world class leaders as well as researchers. So in your opinion, what is the best teachers do that most mentors may not do?
So the one of the most important things, Sri, is that we need to treat each individual as an individual. Each student is different. Each postdoc is different. Their intellectual abilities are different. Their style of working is different, and they really need to try to understand what really makes them to be able to do things in the most effective way. That means understanding each individual becomes the most important thing first. You cannot simply say that one student, you apply the same thing for other student, it doesn't work. So that is why, what ticks this with this person and what makes this person excited and inspired. And then let's make sure that whatever we are trying to give a project, for example, which is within the interests of that particular individual and that particular individual's abilities as well. Despite the best efforts of the professors, when sometimes the research is, particularly at the cutting edge research, it is unpredictable. If you're doing a bachelor's degree or a master's degree or even a high school, you put the effort, and then your outcome is dependent on the amount of effort you put in. But research is non-linear. You may put a lot of effort, but you don't see the outcome of it. It takes time. So sometimes, despite the best efforts of the supervisors, the professors, the things don't work out as planned, because you expected something, but something else is happening. Try to understand why that is happening, and then try to really help them. I tell my students, when everything is going great, you don't need me. When things are not going well, that's the time where you need to knock on my door. because that's a time where you need a holding hand, and then I'll be able to steer you in the right direction. But I may not have the solution to the problem you're dealing with. But I know that because of the fact that I've got research experience, I'll be able to steer you in the right direction with the hope that you'll be able to find the solution to the problem you're dealing with. Something. So that's the most important thing, because of the fact that otherwise what happens is that if you really treat everybody like same, it doesn't work, and it can lead to a lot of frustration. And try to understand the other person is an important one. The second thing is also that help them when they need help, and particularly at a time when things are not working. That's very important. And also, my relationship with my students, in fact, funny enough, starts after finishing their PhD. During their PhD, most of the time they're working with my colleagues because of the fact that they have the most of the time in the lab or so. There are lots of postdoctoral fellowship, and we got also research engineers, and of course my academic colleagues or so. But once they finish their PhD, that's where my mentoring journey starts to the rest of their life. And in fact, even the early students, they keep in touch with me, and then they ask for advice on one thing or the other. And then I say that when they're leaving, and I say that whether you like it or not, you're stuck with your parents and then your PhD supervisor, because we'll keep advising you whether you like it or not, because of the fact that we care about you, sort of thing. So for me, that is why I see that as a lifelong commitment to your students and postdocs, not just a 3 year or 4 year commitment when they are with your group, in your group, and then doing research or so.
One thing I would like to ask you, Professor Chennupati, is that what is the leadership means to you, and how do you differentiate a leader from a manager?
So manager is always trying to make other people to do things, and so that they want to take the credit from everybody else. Leader is the one giving the credit to the people around them. Leaders always give credit to others, and they take very little credit for themselves, because they know that the people whom you're really giving credit and they're all successful, naturally you're also seen as successful. But whereas managers are always looking at themselves, always claiming things from others, that means they'll never make it to the leadership role, because they always stay as managers, because of the fact that, in fact, people want to run away from them. This person is taking credit from them. And then that means, they are not getting the credit they deserve. That means they just want to run away from as soon as they finish their PhD or a postdoc or so sort of thing. So that's why leaders' job is to nurture the people around them, giving more credit than they deserve, are people around you. That means they always want to work with you. They want to collaborate with you. Again, I've collaborated with people from 30 plus countries, and so from the top institutions, including places like Oxford, Cambridge, and Manchester, and various national labs and others. And even today, everybody wants to collaborate with you because you are generous to them. Being generous to your people around you, really, generosity never hurts. Being generous to others, generosity comes back to you. I'm of a strong believer. Generosity recirculates in the society. Being generous to others, others also show generosity to you.
So one last question, Professor Chennupati, is around your endowment fund you started on you and also your wife's name. I think Professor Chennupati and Professor Dr. Vidya's endowment fund to support the younger students from the developing nations. So can you tell us the brief background to it, why you started it and how it is running now, and are you accepting any external contributions to that fund?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Sri. But basically, it's very interesting that, which we get lots of students from Europe to come as a summer scholars, or otherwise, the otherwise master's thesis scholars or so. They write to us and then saying that, well, I am from, University of Marseille in France, or otherwise, University of Augsburg in Germany, or whatever the university is. They want to come and spend some time with us, and then be able to gain the research experience and be able to finish off their, means either the summer project or otherwise a master's project or so. Mainly, they want to come because of the fact that they want to explore Australia, which is a beautiful country, and also improve their English, and then also that be able to travel after finishing their the project or so. And we are very happy to have them because they don't ask for any financial support, and we only provide the lab support and then also supervision or so, which they come and enjoy. But whenever we get requests from any students from the developing countries, it could be India or Indonesia or other countries, or Malaysia, or whatever the developing countries, and we say no to them because of the fact that without funding they cannot come, and we do not have money to be able to support them. So that's where I was feeling guilty for a long time, and so then when I got some funding for being an honorary professor in various parts of the world, and so then I discussed with my wife, and I said, look, this is not the money which I was expecting because I'm already still getting the salary from the ANU, my university. And how do we make use of this one? Of course, also if I put that money into my bank account, and half of it will go for tax. And then we said, look, why don't we use this money to really help others, particularly when the students from developing countries, probably the impact on their lives will be much more significant to come to the ANU and be able to access state-of-the-art equipment and facilities and be able to work with their leading experts in the various fields of physics, for example, rather than a student coming from Sweden or France or Germany, and relatively speaking, the similar facilities and similar expertise is available as well. So my wife said, why don't we go for and do that one sort of thing? Then I'd gone, and then we had, at that time, we had about $140,000 or so. So then I'd gone to the head of the school and then said, look, I want to really create this Vidya Jagadish endowment to support students and young scientists from developing countries to come to ANU and spend some up to 3 months to be able to collaborate with anybody in ANU physics. Our director liked that idea so much, that really this is a brilliant idea, Jagdish. And how about I put $60,000 to add to your contribution to this particular endowment, because its endowment is located in the university.
Mhm.
And then I gone and spoke to my dean, and then my dean said that, oh, this is a brilliant idea, Jagdish, and I want to put $100,000 from the college funds. And then I'd gone and then seen my vice chancellor, and then he said he liked the idea so much, and particularly opening the doors for the bright young people from the developing countries. And then he said he'll put $200,000 from the university funds. And so
Wow.
suddenly, this money, which is $140,000 with after paying tax, it would have been a $70,000 in my bank account, suddenly became a $500,000.
Yeah.
So that's how we launched that endowment. And then also my school director said that, any donations you and Vidya make, and we are happy to match any donations you make, and we continue to make the donations. So we donated about $500,000, and then now it's a more than $1 million fund. So that generates about $50,000 annually income. And then we support about 4 students and 1 young scientist from the developing countries to come and then spend some time at ANU physics. And then we had students mainly from India, and also we had some students from Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Malaysia, and some young scientists as well. And then my university liked the idea so much. My dean of science said, Jagdish, I like this idea so much. I know that your endowment is for the entire any developing country, but we would like to target India and Indonesia. And then the ANU started this so-called Future Research Talents Fund and a scholarship program to be able to support students from India and Indonesia. So covering all aspects of science. So astronomy, biology, chemistry, earth sciences, medical sciences, engineering, and computer science and physics and science communications, all aspects of it. So then, for example, in 2024, we had 90 students came from India plus Indonesia, 75 from India. Only 4 of them are
Wow.
supported by our endowment, and then 15 students came from Indonesia.
So do you accept any funds from the external sources
Yes, yeah.
beyond?
Thank you for that question. Yes, of course, some of the colleagues, so they want to donate. In fact, when we did the launch of this one, some of the friends and colleagues have donated some funds, and some of the former students donate some funds. Some of the colleagues, in fact, when I was officially transitioned to emeritus professor at end of 2024, some of my international collaborators, donated some funds to the endowment, and so they're open for anybody. And so then, anyway, anybody can donate, because again, if we want to open the doors and make a difference in the next generation, and donations are welcome. Of course, it's a tax deductible for Australian taxpayers,
Yeah.
but for not international taxpayers, because it's a Australian charitable entity the university is.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor. It's a pleasure to talk to you. I really appreciate for your time again. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks very much, Sri. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and good luck in your efforts. And then I hope whatever the conversation which we had is useful for the next generation.